Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Economy Talk Show. Today we have four very special guests we invited from Ministry of Finance and University Malaysia Sabah. Here we have Professor Dr. HAFEEZ from University Malaysia Sabah, Dato' THARISNAA, Dato' AIMAN, and Dato' DHARWIN from Ministry of Finance. Today's topic for our talk show we are going to discuss is economic crisis amidst COVID-19 pandemic. Before I pass to our beloved guests to discuss more further about this topic, as far as I concerned, COVID-19 hit our country so badly, started from 25th January 2020, that the Malaysian government took the first step by tightening the control of the movement of Malaysian citizens, also known as the Movement Control Order under the Act 342, Infectious Disease Control Act 1988. Back to our topic is economic crisis amidst COVID-19 pandemic. Based on my research, in terms of economic growth, the impact from crisis have been severe. Malaysian economy contract by 17.1% year-on-year in second quarter 2020, the steepest amount since the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis 1998. Subsequently, the gradual relaxation of movement controls allowed the pace of decline to ease, with Malaysia third quarter 2020 GDP recording a 2.7% decline. But unlike swift economic recovery in Malaysia during the aftermath of the global crisis of GDP will be slow. Back in 2009, a sharp recovery in oil and electronic exports along with a surge in foreign investment allowed GDP to return to pre-crisis levels in less than a year. Today, global energy prices, muted demand from the world's major economies, and a likely slow recovery in global trade make a V-shaped recovery far less likely. And this is how I understand what happened to our economy when COVID-19 hits Malaysia. So I would like to ask Dato' AIMAN, can you tell us some factors why this happened to our economy and why such this happened to us?
Okay, thank you, Arif. So when it comes to the factors of the economic crisis during COVID-19 pandemic, I think all of us will agree that the movement control order announced by the government is the main factor why Malaysia's economic condition is on the tip of the horn. Efforts by the government with multiple modifications to the MCO such as RMCO, CMCO, and EMCO intended to minimize the impact on the economy while saving life and protecting livelihoods were made but failed in the first place. Let's dig in. On 18 March 2020, first MCO, which is a strict lockdown, was announced by the government to curb the spread of the COVID-19. At first, it only took 14 days implementing MCO, but with the increased number of cases, it goes until May 2020. This lockdown halting all non-essential business operation, effectively impacting small medium enterprise (SME) and export production. SME contributes 35% of Malaysian GDP and up to 70% of the jobs in the entire market. With the lockdown condition, SME was severely affected, causing many to face financial struggles. Added to this impact, manufacturers that contribute to Malaysia's export income were ordered to stop operation during the 2-month lockdown, causing it to contract by 8.3% compared to a negative 5.7% growth in 2019. In April 2020, Malaysia reported a trade deficit of 3.5 billion ringgit after 169 consecutive months of a trade surplus. The first MCO has also impacted the tourism industry, suffering losses of 45 million ringgit in tourist expenditure. With all economic losses combined across industry during MCO 1.0, Malaysia suffered a total of 2.4 billion ringgit per day. Throughout the months after MCO 1.0, Malaysia experienced several less restrictive MCOs, such as RMCO and CMCO, but again was forced to implement a stricter one in January 2021 due to the rise in infection cases. However, MCO 2.0 did not have the same extreme impacts, unlike the first MCO, due to the lesser restrictions. To put the economy through a path of recovery, MCO 2.0 allowed most businesses, SMEs, and export manufacturers to remain open. Thus, it lessened the impact on business owners, helping them gain income even during the lockdown. Regardless of this decision, business and SMEs still struggle to stay afloat because they were still recovering from the first. They are still in the recovering phase. Not to mention, many consumer and investors remain pessimistic about the economy and choose to save rather than spend, resulting in a significant reduction in sales and profits. As a result, Malaysia still recorded a loss of 600 million ringgit daily. Just as Malaysia was recovering from the second MCO, it saw an exponential spike in the infection rate since the beginning of May. In response, the government reinstated another MCO with more lenient restrictions, where most businesses were still allowed to operate and eateries only allowed to provide takeaway service only. This modified form of MCO caused the economy to suffer 200 billion ringgit daily, comparably lower than the first two MCOs. However, after a few weeks of MCO 2.0, cases were still increasing and even made record-breaking number when we hit the 9,000 on 2000 and on 2029 May. Datuk Michael Kang, the president of SME Association, predicted that MCO 3.0 will inevitably have a significant impact on SME, as 37.7% of SME were bound to face closure if the lockdown persists. He also mentioned that this can cause more than 40% of SMEs to face financial difficulties in meeting expenses, putting at least 2 million people unemployed by the end of the lockdown. And that is why the economic crisis in Malaysia exists during the COVID-19. But I have the added one point, which is the Malaysian economic crisis got worse when Saudi Arabia increased oil output above 10 billion barrels per day during COVID-19 pandemic that hit the world. I think all of us know about this. This happened when the minister from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, recommended a drastic production cut of 1.5 million barrels a day. The world's largest oil exporter started a price war, which is Saudi Arabia slashing the price itself to foreign market, offering unprecedented discount in Europe, East Asia and the US. Same goes with Russia, who disagree with OPEC's proposed cut to stabilize prices. This crisis affected Malaysia's potential oil by losing up to one-third of it, including taxes and dividend. The price of Brent oil contract fell sharply by 8.9%, or $4.45 a barrel to close at 45.54 a barrel, which is 188 ringgit, with the potential to go down further as traders anticipated a fight for market share among major producers. It is far different from Putrajaya's assumption of $62 per barrel in budget 2020, which is in Malaysia. It will affect the government initiatives such as the fiscal stimulus package worth RM20 billion. Malaysia currency RM becomes weaker against the US dollar when the economy slows down when economy slows down. And Petroleum Nasional Sdn Bhd Petronas will see a cut in their margins from the weaker price and leave little room for capital expenditure if the government insists on a regular payment of dividend and leave them at a disadvantage for not having additional new oil sites to sustain their production and revenue due to reduced investment or exploration activities. The drop in crude oil prices led the federal government to cut prices of petrol at the pump by as much as 21 cents per litre to RM 2 ringgit 19 cents for RON 97 and 90 cents for RON 95, which is RM 1 ringgit and 80 cents. When this is happening, a lot of raw material prices increase due to the decreases in oil prices. It will make the citizen suffer with the goods prices. And it really happened when the face mask prices increased up to the 150% as it is the item that must be purchased during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I can say the conclusion about this, which is the MCO and also the crisis oil price is the main factor why Malaysia having the economic crisis.
Oh, now I understand why this situation happened to us. So I would like to ask Dr. Darwin, can you tell us the effects of the economic crisis on our nations?
Okay, thank you, Arif. So for the effects of the COVID-19 to the economy, so by now it's clear that this pandemic have intensely damaging effects on the both Malaysian macroeconomy as well as on the economic welfare of the people. The main sources of economic damage in Malaysia are twofold. The first one is knock-on effect from the impacts of the coronavirus abroad. The second one is the generated domestically due to the newly imposed movement control measures. Okay, the first one, the long before the partial lockdown measures in Malaysia, the outbreak of the new coronavirus in China had created the wide-ranging supply and demand shocks that have been reverberated across the globe. Commodity exporters around the world braved lower prices as China's demand collapsed, while the global manufacturers faced the production cuts as China's factories are the lockdown. In Malaysia, the effects of these China's shocks may be serious. The Malaysian economy is amongst the most highly exposed economies in the region to the both China's demand and supply. China is the Malaysia's #1 trading partner and also a large source of foreign investment, and also is a top tourist source outside of Asia. Additionally, over the past decade, Malaysian firms have become the most deeply integrated in the global production networks. This is compounded by the fact that regional supply chains that have become increasingly in China-centric. Indeed, more than a quarter of Malaysian trade, which is about 20 billion US dollar in 2018, is made up of the intermediate components, exactly the kind of products that gets affected the most when global supply chains are disrupted. Second is the MCO measures, while absolutely essential in impeding the outbreak of the new coronavirus in Malaysia, while will have the devastating economic cost too. On a macro level, the closure of the business and services, along with the travel and movement control, will have an outside impact on the private consumption and the business investment. The adverse effects on the individual livelihoods and business will be even more pernicious. Individuals and businesses affected by the temporary closure will be at the high risk of facing immediate cash flow constraints as their earnings dividendly. Critically, this liquidity squeeze will be unreasonably felt by the small and medium enterprises and vulnerable groups such as lower income individuals, part-time and unemployed workers. So this can have a knock-on effects on the entire economy, leaving the business insolvent, individuals bankrupt, and the business system saddled with the non-performing loans. So these are the economic effects on the COVID-19.
Oh, okay. That's the effects of COVID-19 to our nation, right? So I would like to ask Professor Dr. Hafiz, do you want to add more on Dr. Darwin said?
Well, I like to agree that the impact of the COVID-19 on the economy is it create liquidity problems, right? Because like because like when oil hits the NPO, people cannot look the store and people are still shocked what to do, right? So the business has problems in their cash flow, on which it will lead to problems in paying the employee salaries, rent, operational expenses, etc. etc. So this and most of our money we keep in the bank and we want to withdraw it, right? So that's the problem. right? If everyone just withdraw their deposits at the same time, it would lead to with a liquidity problem, especially those who are micro SMEs or micro entrepreneurs, where they are not very proficient or active traders or lenders, and they rely on physical transaction, right? Physical store where customer come to the store and then they tell their goods and etc. And they are not very good at digitalization or online selling, right? Online e-marketing. So when these people do not have income, their income has in has stopped. They don't they have less money to spend, and they are relying on their savings and the government financial aid. So yeah, that's the overall problem. One of the problems that I can see in the during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you, Cyrus.
All right. Okay, thanks, Professor Dr. Hafiz and Dr. Darwin for your further explanations. Okay, Hafiz, can you tell us the solution for our economic crisis right now?
Well, as much as I know, I'm actually background in financial business, right? So I would like to talk about the monetary policies that been created by the BMN, right? So there are four policies. The first one is monetary policy rate, statutory return requirement, moratorium, and financial stimulus package, right? So let's talk about the first and the second, right? So the monetary policy rate, when the bank cut its policy rate from to 1.5 and 1.75%, which is a historic low level, while external demand rebounded faster than expected, and with opening of the domestic economy expanded, the central bank maintained its policy rate. The headline inflation was considerably negative over the course of 2020, but core inflation was stable around 1%, which is legitimize this policy stand. Second, the statutory reserve requirement. The BMM also reduced in March 2020 its statutory reserve requirement, or SRR, to banks from 3% to 2%, with an additional ease in its position in order to provide sufficient liquidity to the financial markets. Most of these pools launched by the BMN and would lead to increased money making in the economy. By decreasing interest rate and the statutory reserve requirement rate, the bank had more money to provide loans for durable goods consumption and deposit withdrawal for purchasing non-durable goods and services. Commercial banks will be able to provide more grants and financial schemes for businesses to expand their business, or at least to survive their business. Hence, newly created money in the economy can be used to bolster aggregate expenditure to increase in investment and consumption. Eventually, the policy will help to narrow the deflation gap, stabilizing the price of goods and recovering our economy to increase in GDP. Now, the third tools used by the Bank Malaysia is moratorium. Right? We know that a high level of household debt could become a concern, although the part of gross debt that reflects a housing ownership in Malaysia, which is more applicable to a higher income household given the wider income gap. More vulnerable lower income households need further support, particularly if the recovery in the labor market is delayed. So, amid this loan moratorium program, which is 7.1% of Malaysian GDP, was given for 6 months starting from April 2020. A government loan guarantee scheme and sector lending facilities for SMEs. Moratorium on loans or financing repayments by financial institutions is available for 6 months from 1 April 2020, which has been extended for 3 months from 1 October 2020 for targeted groups, especially the B40 and the M40. These programs have supported the affected sectors very effectively in the emergency phase, particularly the SMEs, and helped mitigate short-term liquidity constraints. Last but not least is the financial stimulus package. There are many stimulus packages provided by the DNM to support the government effort to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. So the first one is there are additional allocations for the micro-credit schemes and relaxation of application conditions for qualifying micro-entrepreneurs. A special grant of 300 ringgit is given to each qualifying micro-SMEs, and micro-SMEs must register with the Malaysian Inland Revenue Board. The financial scheme is extended to the full national scheme with a fund of 400 million and an interest rate of 0%. The maximum loan amount is set at 10,000 ringgit for each micro company. A special relief facility by the DMM or SMEs at 3.75% interest, but a credit facility by GSM at 4% interest. Restructure and rescheduling of loans, annual food facility by DNM at 3.5%, and last but not least, the SME calculation and digitalization facility by the DNM at 3.75% interest. So you see that there are many tools or leverages made by the DNM to help support the economy. But the question is how effective does the government, does the DNM monetary policy to their economy? I shall pass it to our moderator, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Last but not least, I would like to ask Dr. THARISNAA about the effectiveness using the solution that thanks to Professor Dr. HAFEEZ said just now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Arif, to give a wonderful opportunity to talk me in this talk show. So I'll be explaining the effectiveness of fiscal and monetary policies. So coming to the straight point, the fundamental objective is to utilize and implement these policies in which the central government steers the economy's course towards sustainable growth, ensures the price stability, and attracts foreign investment by creating a favorable business environment. The vast majority of this research backs up the claim that policies have a considerable impact on aggregate economic growth via a variety of micro factors. There's a trade-off effect between fiscal policy and unemployment and productivity rates, according to which the initiative to subsidize employment will result in more financing by the wealthy, which will lead to lesser investment and ultimately lower employment and productivity. However, empirical research showed that this is not the case. With subsidized employment, labor-related competition leads to increased labor efficiency, which leads to higher employment and productivity rates. Furthermore, there is a strong link between fiscal and monetary policies and the environment, especially in the low-carbon economy. For example, it has been stated that the development of a high-income society through balanced policies has increased environmental awareness and demand. Hence, the problem of low carbon emissions. in terms of Malaysian experience, a review of reports about Malaysians' performance in terms of the effectiveness of its fiscal and monetary policies in countering COVID-19's environmental repercussions indicated that no empirical studies have been conducted to date. So that's all from me. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to our guest for explaining about our situation economy right now in Malaysia. So I think our show come to an end. I hope the audience understand what our guests talk about, because what the guests said are based on their past experience. So because we should listen carefully, because knowledge is power. I think that's all for now. Thank you for joining and listening our economic talk show. Thank you.
Thank you.